The interstellar concordance had, in its infinite wisdom and bureaucratic bloat, decided that Survey Mission 447 Theta would be the perfect opportunity for cross-species cooperation and mutual understanding, which was a fancy way of saying they'd stuffed representatives from 12 different civilizations into one ship and hoped nobody would start an interstellar incident before lunch. Spoiler alert, they didn't even make it to lunch. The vessel gloriously named the Harmonious Endeavor because apparently the Concordance's naming committee had a cruel sense of irony, had been cruising through an uncharted sector when its navigation systems decided to have what could only be described as a complete existential breakdown. One moment, they were mapping stellar phenomena. The next, they were becoming a stellar phenomenon themselves, specifically the kind that involves screaming, falling, and a whole lot of fire. The planet they crashed on wasn't even supposed to be there. It had somehow escaped every survey, every probe, every long-range scan conducted over the past 3 centuries. It was as if the universe had hidden this particular marble in its cosmic pocket and forgotten about it. Dense jungle stretched in every direction, the canopy so thick it turned midday into twilight, and the air hung heavy with moisture and the calls of creatures that probably hadn't evolved enough to fear things dropping from the sky in burning metal tubes. Commander Vexthal, a Chronothian whose species had spent the last millennium perfecting the art of looking perpetually disappointed, surveyed the wreckage with all 4 of his optical senses. His carapace, usually a dignified shade of diplomatic blue, had taken on a stress-induced purple hue. "Status report," he mandated, his translator rendering his clicking language into something approximating bureaucratic resignation. The crew had survived, which was either a miracle or the universe's idea of a joke. Tech specialist Quern, whose species the Floxians resembled nothing so much as oversized moss with anxiety issues, trembled in 3 different directions at once. "The emergency beacon is functional, Commander. Rescue should arrive in approximately 47 standard hours, assuming they can locate us through this planet's unusual magnetic interference." 47 hours, Vexthal repeated. "Supplies destroyed in the crash, sir." The cargo bay took a direct hit from something that definitely shouldn't have exploded, but did anyway. The assembled aliens, a collection of scales, fur, chitin, and things that defied categorization, processed this information with varying degrees of alarm. The Xenthorians began a harmonic wailing that their species reserved for impending doom. The Qualxian representative started cycling through colors that probably meant something concerning in his language. And then there were the humans. Lieutenant Marcus Webb and Specialist Kenji Okonkwo stood slightly apart from the group, having the kind of quiet conversation that made everyone nervous. They weren't panicking, they weren't wailing. They were looking at the jungle with an expression that could only be described as appraising, like they were touring a house they might consider buying. So Marcus said, loud enough for the group to hear, his tone aggressively casual, "We should probably eat something." The resulting silence was the kind that usually preceded either enlightenment or disaster. In this case, it was somehow both. The hunger sets. The aliens had protocols for this. Of course they had protocols. The galactic community had protocols for everything, from first contact to proper waste disposal in zero gravity. The Concordance had spent centuries developing elaborate systems for every conceivable emergency, because thinking through problems was what civilized species did. Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha, Vexthal announced, accessing his neural implants database. In the event of supply loss with imminent rescue, personnel are to enter a meditative state to reduce caloric consumption while maintaining core cognitive functions. We could synchronize our respiratory systems to conserve oxygen offered Quern, whose people could lower their metabolism to near hibernation levels. The reduced activity would minimize hunger responses. A Varelian engineer, whose name translated to something like whispers in starlight, but whom everyone called Whisper, undulated thoughtfully. His species could survive for weeks without sustenance, a fact he mentioned with the casual superiority of someone whose evolutionary advantages included not needing things. Perhaps we should compose dignified messages to our families. It seems appropriate to face this trial with philosophical grace. The gathering murmured agreement. Yes, they would face potential starvation with dignity. They would meditate, they would conserve, they would contemplate the cosmic significance of their predicament. They were advanced beings, after all, not primitives who would panic at the mere absence of pre-packaged nutrition pods. Marcus and Kenji had wandered to the edge of the clearing, examining broken branches and disturbed soil with interest. "You seeing these tracks?" Kenji asked, pointing at a series of impressions in the mud. "Yeah, something big, quadrupedal, probably herbivorous based on the scat composition." Marcus crouched down, completely ignoring the philosophical contemplation of dignified starvation happening behind him. "There's a water source nearby. You can hear it if you listen. Where there's water, there's game. I'm thinking deadfalls for the larger prey, snares for the smaller stuff," Kenji said, as if discussing the weather. "We've got maybe 4 hours of good daylight left. Should be enough time to set up a decent perimeter." Vexthol's optical sensors swiveled toward the humans, with something approaching alarm. "What are you discussing?" Marcus stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Hunting, sir. We need food, and this jungle's full of it. Give us a few hours, and we'll have something cooking by nightfall." "Hunting." The word emerged from Vexthol's translator, with all the horror of someone being informed that the solution to their transportation problem involved setting themselves on fire and rolling downhill. "You intend to pursue and kill indigenous life forms. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds bad," Kenji replied, grinning. "We prefer to think of it as aggressive foraging." The aliens exchanged glances that crossed species barriers, universal expressions of beings witnessing something that challenged their fundamental understanding of civilized behavior. The Crinothians had been post-scarcity for 6,000 years. The Phloxians grew their food in vats. The Vorelians photosynthesized, for cosmic sake. The concept of chasing down another living creature and eating it was something their species had transcended before they'd even developed spaceflight. "This is unnecessary," Whisper said, his voice resonating with that particular frequency that conveyed both wisdom and judgment. "We can survive until rescue arrives through metabolic regulation." "You might be able to," Marcus said cheerfully. "Humans, we get cranky when we're hungry. And trust me, you don't want to be stuck in a jungle with cranky humans for 2 days." Kenji was already pulling equipment from his pack cord, a knife, some metal clips that had survived the crash. Besides, sitting around contemplating cosmic significance on an empty stomach sounds like a fast track to making bad decisions. We eat, we stay sharp, we increase our survival odds. It's pretty simple math. What followed could only be described as a masterclass in techniques that most galactic citizens believed existed only in anthropological archives about pre-technological civilizations. The humans moved through the jungle with purpose, identifying game trails with disturbing ease, reading the forest like it was a language they'd spoken since birth. Marcus found a suitable spot where 2 trees formed a natural funnel, exactly the kind of path an animal would take, moving between feeding and water sources. He began constructing what he called a deadfall trap, with the enthusiasm of an artist explaining their craft. "See, "You want a heavy log here," he narrated, gathering a fallen branch that required both humans to lift. "Prop it up with a trigger stick configuration. Figure 4 is classic, but we'll adapt based on materials." The aliens watched with mounting horror and fascination. The prey walks under, disturbs the bait stick, and the whole thing comes down. Marcus continued, setting the mechanism with practiced care. "Quick, effective, and requires zero technology. Our ancestors were building these when your ancestors were probably still figuring out single-celled reproduction. No offense." "Some taken," muttered Quern, whose species had indeed spent an embarrassingly long time as colonial organisms. Kenji worked on snares, creating loops from cord with a series of complex knots that seemed to materialize from muscle memory. "Snares are beautiful in their simplicity," he explained to an audience that definitely hadn't asked. "You find a run, that's a path animals use regularly, anchor one end, create a loop at the right height, and add a spring pole to lift the catch. The animal basically catches itself. That seems unnecessarily cruel," observed a Zenthorian, whose species considered even harvesting plants to be morally complex. "More cruel than starving?" Kenji asked, not unkindly. "Look, I get it. Your people evolved past this. But humans, we've got about 10,000 years of agricultural civilization behind us, and about 200,000 years of hunting and gathering before that. This isn't some fun hobby, it's hardwired into our species' memory." Marcus was now explaining pit traps to anyone within earshot, which was everyone because his voice carried. "You'd think these would take forever, but if you know what you're doing, and the soil's right, you can dig an effective pit in under an hour. Cover it with branches and leaves, funnel your prey toward it, and gravity does the work." Humans have devoted considerable cognitive resources to developing methods of capturing other living beings, Vexthal observed, his translator somehow conveying profound unease. "Oh, you have no idea," Marcus said cheerfully. "We've got box traps, cage traps, net traps, fish traps, bird traps. We've got traps for traps, in case the animal is smart enough to avoid the first trap. We've spent millennia in an arms race with everything else on our planet that didn't want to be eaten. The humans worked for 3 hours straight, barely slowing. They constructed 6 different traps, each suited to different prey sizes and behaviors. They explained concepts like bait placement and scent masking, and reading animal psychology, treating survival skills like common knowledge rather than the specialized expertise it clearly was." Whisper watched from a safe distance, his luminescent form pulsing with what might have been respect or possibly indigestion. "Your species is remarkably focused on predation. Predation, cooperation, adaptation. Humans are kind of good at the whole survival thing," Kenji said, checking the tension on a snare. "Our planet tried really hard to kill us for a few 100,000 years. We took it personally. By the time they finished, the jungle was rigged like a gauntlet. Any creature moving through the area would encounter a carefully designed series of obstacles, each one a small monument to human ingenuity, applied toward the specific goal of not starving. Now we wait," Marcus announced. "Game's most active at dusk and dawn. We should have something by nightfall." The aliens settled into their meditation protocols, trying very hard not to think about the fact that their survival now depended on 2 humans and their disturbingly comprehensive knowledge of how to kill things. The first trap triggered just as the sun began its descent, painting the canopy in shades of orange and crimson. The sound echoed through the jungle, a heavy thud followed by high-pitched squealing that made several aliens question their commitment to interspecies cooperation. Marcus was on his feet instantly, moving toward the sound with Kenji close behind. The rest of the crew followed at a more hesitant pace, morbid curiosity overriding their philosophical objections. The deadfall had worked exactly as designed. Beneath the log lay a creature roughly the size of a large pig, covered in mottled scales and sporting a series of feathered crests that now lay flat in death. It had stopped moving. "Beautiful," Marcus said, and he clearly meant it. "Clean kill, no suffering. This is at least 40 kilos of meat." Kenji was already checking the other traps. Got 2 more in the snares, smaller, maybe 10 kilos each, and something triggered the pit trap, but it climbed out. "We'll reinforce that tonight." The aliens stared at the dead creature with varying expressions of horror, fascination, and most disturbingly hunger, because despite their advanced civilizations and sophisticated food production, the smell of fresh meat triggered something primal in species that still possessed olfactory systems. "You killed it," Quern stated, which was technically accurate but missed the point spectacularly. "We did," Marcus agreed, crouching beside the creature with what could only be described as professional interest. "And now we're going to process it, cook it, and eat it. You're all welcome to join us, by the way. No judgment if you'd prefer to meditate instead." Vexthal's carapace had shifted to a color that probably indicated complex emotions his species had 17 different words for. "Your people still engage in this behavior regularly. Hunting." "Not most of us. Not anymore," Kenji said, retrieving the smaller catches from the snares. "But farming, fishing, animal husbandry, yeah, that's still pretty standard across most of Earth. We didn't go post-scarcity until about 30 years ago, and even then, a lot of humans still prefer to know where their food comes from." "Why?" The question came from Whisper, genuine confusion in his resonant voice. "Why would an advanced species maintain such primitive practices when synthesis and cultivation are more efficient?" Marcus looked up from his work, something hard glinting in his eyes. "Because on Earth, efficiency doesn't mean much if you're dead. Our planet has ice ages, droughts, volcanic winters, meteor impacts. We've been through extinction events that would have wiped out species that depended on infrastructure. Humans who could hunt, who could trap, who could look at literally anything and figure out if it was edible. Those humans survived. The rest didn't." He pulled out his knife, and several aliens took instinctive steps backward. "Our ancestors didn't get to the top of the food chain by being nice," Kenji added, his tone conversational but carrying weight. "We got there by being adaptable, persistent, and absolutely refusing to die, no matter what the universe threw at us. Every human alive today is descended from thousands of generations of survivors who looked at a hostile world and said, 'Not today.' The knife work that followed was efficient and practiced." Marcus Field dressed the large creature with swift precision, explaining each step to an audience that was simultaneously revolted and captivated. "You want to remove the organs quickly to prevent contamination. Save the heart and liver. Those are nutritious and cook well. The rest of the organs we can use for bait if we need to set more traps." "This knowledge is common among your species?" Vexthal asked, watching with all 4 optical sensors despite clearly wanting to look away. "Basic survival training, yeah. Military personnel, emergency responders, anyone who works in remote locations, we all learn this stuff." Marcus separated usable meat from waste with practiced efficiency. "But honestly, millions of humans know how to do this. It's not some secret art. It's just being human." If the aliens thought the butchering was disturbing, the fire-starting process sent them into new territories of concern. Kenji had gathered materials while Marcus processed the meat: dry wood, tinder, stones of specific composition. He arranged them with the care of someone performing a sacred ritual, which, from a certain anthropological perspective, he absolutely was. "Fire's humanity's first technology," he said, striking stone against metal salvaged from the crash. Sparks flew, catching in the prepared tinder. Every human civilization, everywhere on Earth, figured out fire. It's literally what made us human. Cooked food meant better nutrition. Better nutrition meant bigger brains. Bigger brains meant we could invent new ways to not die. The tinder smoked, then caught. Kenji nursed the flame with careful breaths, adding progressively larger pieces of wood until a proper fire crackled in the clearing. The aliens regarded it with the wariness of beings whose species had sensible fears. Fire, after all, was dangerous. Fire consumed. Fire destroyed. Most civilized species had moved past open combustion shortly after achieving sentience. "You're going to cook the meat," Vextal said, watching orange flames dance. "Using uncontrolled combustion. That's one way to describe grilling." "Sure," Marcus said, grinning. He was constructing a spit from green branches, another skill that apparently all humans just knew. Fire kills parasites, breaks down proteins, makes nutrients more accessible. Plus, it tastes incredible. The meat went on to makeshift racks over the coals. Fat sizzled and dripped, sending up smoke that carried an aroma that transcended species barriers. Even Whisper, who photosynthesized and theoretically didn't eat at all, drifted closer. The moral implications began as Enthorian, then faltered as the smell intensified. "Look, I get it," Kenji said, turning the meat to ensure even cooking. "Your species evolved past this. You synthesize nutrients, you grow food in controlled environments, you've eliminated the predator-prey dynamic from your civilizations. That's genuinely impressive." "But," prompted Quern, because there was clearly a but coming, "but you're also dependent on infrastructure, on supply chains, on technology that can fail." Marcus gestured at the crashed ship behind them. "We just lost all of that. And humans, we're right back in our element, because our element is anywhere we can find water, fire, and something to eat." Kenji pulled out a handful of plants he'd gathered while checking traps. Roots, leaves, something that looked like berries but probably wasn't. "Your database has these marked as non-toxic, by the way. Checked while you all were meditating. They're not going to taste like much, but they'll add nutrients and fiber. You tested plants from an alien world for edibility," Vextal said slowly, "while preparing to consume indigenous fauna, using fire. When you list it like that, it sounds really primitive," Marcus admitted. "But yeah, that's basically the situation." The philosophical crisis was visible across multiple species. They were advanced beings. They had faster-than-light travel. They had neural implants and quantum computing, and had unraveled the fundamental forces of the universe. And here they were, watching two humans turn the jungle into a restaurant using nothing but knives, fire, and knowledge that predated written language. "The Concordance will want a full report on this," Quern murmured. "Please do include the part where we didn't starve to death while philosophically contemplating our dignified demise," Kenji replied, checking the meat's internal temperature by touch, which was apparently another thing humans could just do. By the time the stars emerged through gaps in the canopy, the clearing had transformed. The fire cast dancing shadows. The smell of cooked meat had drawn every curious creature within a kilometer radius, and the humans had created something that resembled an actual meal rather than emergency survival rations. Marcus arranged portions on broad leaves that served as plates. The meat had been seasoned with crushed roots that provided something approximating salt and pepper. The alien vegetables had been roasted at the fire's edge, their strange colors somehow more appealing when charred. It wasn't haute cuisine, but it was hot, substantial, and definitely food. "Dinner's ready," Kenji announced. "Come get it before we eat your share." The aliens approached with varying degrees of hesitation. Vexthal led the way because command apparently meant being first to potentially poison yourself. He accepted a portion, regarding it with all four optical senses as if it might attack. "It won't bite back," Marcus said helpfully. "That's kind of the whole point of cooking it." Vexthal took what might charitably be called a bite, though his species didn't technically have mouths in the traditional sense. The resulting series of clicks and whistles made the translator work overtime. "This is acceptable." "High praise," Kenji said, grinning. One by one, the aliens tried the food. Reactions ranged from surprised acceptance to something approaching enthusiasm. Quern discovered that the roasted roots paired well with his species' biochemistry. Whisper, who shouldn't have been able to taste anything, absorbed nutrients through osmosis and reported fascinating new molecular structures. The Zenthorian stopped wailing long enough to consume 3 portions. "I don't understand," Quern said around a mouthful of meat that his ancestors would have found horrifying. "How is this so delicious?" Marcus offered. "Humans have been perfecting cooking for about 1 million years. We've had time to figure out which parts of which animals taste good and how to make them taste better." "Your species weaponized flavor," Vexthal observed, reaching for seconds despite his earlier reservations. "We weaponized everything," Kenji corrected. "Flavor just happened to be something we could weaponize in a positive direction." The meal continued as darkness settled fully over the jungle. The fire kept predators at bay while attracting the crew like moths, both for warmth and for the simple primal comfort of shared food. Barriers between species began to lower, facilitated by full stomachs and the universal experience of not dying. "So explain this to me," Whisper said, his form pulsing with colors that indicated curiosity. "Your entire species maintained hunting traditions even after developing agriculture." "Not just maintained," Marcus said, poking at the fire to redistribute coals. "Humans have been farming for about 12,000 years, but we never stopped hunting. Different cultures, different approaches, some hunted for food, some for tradition, some for population management. But the knowledge stayed alive." Kenji nodded, adding another piece of wood to the fire. "Earth's ecosystems are complicated. Sometimes too many of one animal throws everything off balance. Humans stepped into that role. We became apex predators that could think about the consequences of predation." "That seems contradictory," Quern observed. "Predators that care about their prey populations." "It's called conservation," Marcus explained. "We learned the hard way that wiping out species is bad for everyone, including us. So we adapted. We created regulations, protected habitats, managed populations. We became predators with a conscience, which is possibly the most human thing ever." Vexthal's carapace had settled into a contemplative shade. "The Crinothians abandoned hunting approximately 6 millennia ago, when we achieved synthetic protein production. We viewed it as transcending our base instincts. And that worked great," Kenji said, no judgment in his tone, "right up until this exact moment when your synthetic proteins are 47 hours away and you're eating something." Marcus trapped using a technique literally older than civilization. The commander made a sound that the translator rendered as contemplative humming. There may be wisdom in maintaining practical knowledge alongside technological advancement. It's not just about survival, Marcus added, his voice taking on a thoughtful quality. For humans, hunting and farming and cooking, they're about connection. To our history, to our planet, to each other. My grandfather taught me to trap. His grandfather taught him. It's knowledge passed down through generations, and every time we use it, we're connected to every human who came before us. Humans romanticize struggle, Whisper observed, though not unkindly. Maybe, Kenji admitted. Or maybe we just recognize that comfort makes you soft, and the universe has a habit of introducing discomfort right when you least expect it. Every human knows that civilization is 3 meals away from chaos. We plan accordingly. The conversation drifted through topics both profound and mundane. The aliens shared their own histories. The Floxians transition from colonial organisms to individuals. The Voralians' evolution from ocean dwellers to energy beings. The Cronothians' long climb from tribal societies to their current bureaucratic paradise. Each species had overcome challenges, adapted, evolved, but none of them, it became clear, had maintained the same relationship with survival that humans had. They'd transcended their primitive origins. They'd left behind the need for practical skills in favor of technological solutions. "Is it not exhausting?" asked Quern, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Maintaining all these redundant capabilities when technology can solve the same problems more efficiently." Marcus considered this while turning a piece of meat that would serve as tomorrow's breakfast. "You know what's exhausting? Dying because your technology failed and you forgot how to survive without it. Humans are paranoid. We keep backups for our backups. We maintain old skills alongside new ones, because we've learned, usually through catastrophic failures, that the universe doesn't care about your efficiency metrics. Plus," Kenji added with a grin, "technology can't replicate the taste of fresh-caught game cooked over an open fire. Some things are just better the old-fashioned way." The rescue ship arrived exactly on schedule, dropping through the canopy like salvation descending from a bureaucratic heaven. Its scanners had triangulated the emergency beacon through the magnetic interference, and its crew emerged expecting to find survivors in various states of distress. Instead, they found a well-fed, organized camp that smelled strongly of smoke and cooking meat. Captain Threnix, a Cronothian who'd probably gone through the same command training as Vexthay, surveyed the scene with all 4 optical sensors. "Commander, your status report indicated supplies were destroyed in the crash." "Correct," Vexthay confirmed, his carapace displaying colors that might have been satisfaction or possibly smugness. "Then how?" Marcus and Kenji were in the process of dismantling their traps, salvaging cord and materials with the efficiency of people who never wasted resources. The remains of several meals were evident around the camp, along with the framework for smoking meat, because apparently the humans had decided that 2 days was enough time to start preserving food. "The humans hunted," Vexthay explained, and the translator somehow conveyed both the absurdity and inevitability of this statement. Captain Threnix processed this information. "They hunted on an uncharted planet. Using what equipment?" "Sticks mostly," Quern offered, which was technically accurate but missed several important details. "And rocks, and knowledge that predates spaceflight." It was remarkably effective. The rescue crew exchanged glances that transcended species barriers, the universal expression of people realizing they'd missed something significant. "We'll need to file a report," Threnix said slowly. "The Concordance will want to know how Survey Mission 447 Theta survived supply loss on an uncharted world. We can keep it simple, Marcus suggested, coiling the last of his snare cord. Humans did human things. Everyone else ate well. Situation resolved. The concordance doesn't do simple, Vexthay replied, but his carapace flashed colors that might have been amusement. As the crew prepared for evacuation, Whisper drifted over to where the humans were packing their gear. I must admit, I underestimated your species' capabilities. Most people do, Kenji said cheerfully. We're kind of used to it. Your willingness to maintain primitive skills despite technological advancement seemed inefficient when we departed. Now it appears to be wisdom. Marcus shouldered his pack, glancing back at the jungle that had provided for them. Here's the thing about humans, we don't forget where we came from. Every one of us is descended from survivors who looked at a dangerous universe and decided to survive anyway. That's not primitive. That's practical. And kind of beautiful when you think about it, Kenji added. We reached the stars, but we never stopped being the same species that learned to make fire and chase down prey. We just got better at both. The rescue ship lifted off, carrying its crew of well-fed survivors back toward civilization. In the aftermath, reports would be filed, analyses would be conducted, and the concordance would engage in lengthy debates about the implications of humans maintaining survival skills in an age of post-scarcity abundance. But in that moment, as the jungle receded below and the stars beckoned above, the crew of Survey Mission 447 Theta shared a universal understanding that crossed all barriers of species and culture. Sometimes the most advanced solution to a problem is remembering that your ancestors already solved it 100,000 years ago. Vexthay filed his preliminary report during the journey back. Under lessons learned, he wrote, human survival capabilities remain robust despite technological advancement. Recommend all future mixed species missions include human personnel for redundancy purposes. Also recommend humans not be allowed to name their survival techniques, as phrases like aggressive foraging substantially undersell the complexity of their methods. The concordance would later mandate survival training for all survey personnel, incorporating techniques that humans had been using since before the first alien species had achieved spaceflight. They would, of course, develop sophisticated technological solutions to implement these primitive methods, because some civilizations simply couldn't help themselves. But on certain frontier stations where the infrastructure was still developing and the technology wasn't quite reliable yet, you'd find aliens learning to build fires, set snares, and identify edible plants. They'd learn these skills from humans who taught with the patient amusement of people watching others discover what they'd always known. The universe was vast and dangerous and utterly indifferent to the survival of any species. But humans had looked at that vast, dangerous, indifferent universe and said, we'll take our chances. And then they'd built a trap, caught dinner, and turned survival into an art form. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they persisted, and they absolutely refused to let a little thing like crashing on an uncharted planet interfere with mealtime. Some species transcended their origins. Humans just packed theirs in a survival kit and took them to the stars.